the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And we're up and we're recording, Taylor. We're having some fun little banter about a not so fun thing that happened to you with a little fender bender you experienced, which sucks. But it sounds like everybody's fine, everybody's healthy. The car is a little bit, dented in or busted up, but
the car is dented, but it's not totaled, so we're good. Miles is in the car with me, but he's good. His car seat did what it was supposed to do. It kept him straight up and safe and good. So someone hit us on the side, on the driver's side, and he was on that side as well. And I got a little jostled, but his seat kept him good. So we're okay.
Nice. Good to hear that.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, cool. We'll get and dive right in. Yes, I will do the intro because I'll remember this time. We're doomed to fail. Bars joined here by Taylor. We're going to be discussing two topics this week. I believe I go first this week. Is that right, Taylor?
No, I think I go first.
Okay.
Wait, I bet I don't know. Wait, I need to check. What was last week?
What did we do last week?
No, I go first because you did Eat and Mean and I did Triangle Shirtwaist.
Cool. All right, we'll do. Yep. You're right. Sweet. So it is your turn to go, and I'm curious if you're going to give me some clues on what you're going to cover.
One clue for you is, can you see what I'm wearing?
A bunch of pearls.
Yep. Who do they remind you of?
Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
No, but that's good. That's pretty good. It could be her. No, I bought these pearls at Walmart because I knew that I was going to be doing this, and I knew I'd find them there because this kind of costume jewelry, especially these pearls, are something that was popularized by a certain woman fashion designer in the 1940s and 1950s, as well, maybe the 30s is when she started doing the costume jewelry. So she's one of the most famous women fashion designers in the world, and also she was a Nazi.
Chanel.
Remember? Chanel. Exactly. And I love these pearls. I'm going to wear them all the time. They were like $6 and I just love them.
So they're real. So they're authentic.
They're real. Yeah. Someone
it.
dove into the ocean for these guys.
You look so rich right now.
Don't I? Don't I?
Yeah.
So I did a whole bunch of research for this. I read a bunch of New York Times articles. I read the book Sleeping with the Enemy about Chanel and her Nazi boyfriend. And I have a bunch of other articles that I will share with you. I watched a YouTube video called Stop Idolizing Coco Chanel, A Shocking History of Theft, and listened to a podcast. It was the myth of Coco Chanel, all the things. So this is the thing that I talk about every Women's History Month on Twitter. I deleted all my Twitters because Twitter is stupid, but I did keep my one every March where I'm for the past 6 years, I'm hey, it's March, reminder, Coco Chanel was a Nazi, just so that everyone remembers and knows. So I think before I tell you about Coco and her life, I do want to talk a little bit about separating art from the artist. Because it's I think it's a personal decision, what you want to do and how you want to be. It's I want to wear these pearls, but I don't want to say that Coco Chanel was not a Nazi. You know what I mean? And so I think that it's up to you what you want to do. For example, I love Michael Jackson music. There's no replacement for that in my life.
Yeah.
I'm gonna listen to it. And things that I do, I don't want to go to Chick-fil-A because they have garbage political policies, and that's fine. It doesn't affect my life. But I can buy other chicken sandwiches, whatever. So that's a personal decision of mine. I think the big one right now is Harry Potter. Because J.K. Rowling just keeps doubling down on hating trans people for no fucking reason. And you're why are you doing this? But
so is your point that being selective about separating the art from the artist is okay? I missed your point.
No, I think it's okay. I think it's a personal decision and it's whatever you want to do as long as you know the context. You know what I mean? So if you're so that's my point. So J.K. Rowling is doing garbage things on Twitter all the time, everywhere about hating trans people. She's making that her life's mission. And you're why are you doing this? You could have just walked away with your billions of dollars and not done that. But so for me, I can still love Harry Potter for all that Harry Potter has done, and I love it. It's great. My kids love it. all that. But what I'm not gonna do is I'm not gonna go to like a woman's author conference and quote J.K. Rowling. And like I know how like I have a Ford car, even though last week you were like Ford cars are garbage for 7,000
Oh
hours for
my
some
God,
reason.
I totally forgot that you had a Ford when I said that. I'm really, really sorry.
No, I mean like I think that was a weird opinion for you to have, but that's fine. It's also not like an a $80,000 Ford. It's like a regular, safe, American-made Ford.
Right,
Who cares?
right.
Um, but um, so yeah, so that's it. Like I can have a Ford and know that Henry Ford was violently anti-Semitic and that Hitler loved him, and like
I
I
think
can separate that.
my separation, my distinction is like what is criminal versus what is opinion. I don't know. It's so complicated.
It is, and it's your
The
choice.
Michael Jackson one is like pretty tough.
It's a rough one, but like also like I love watching Thriller every Halloween. Like
I
I know
know.
it's a rough one. It sucks. I mean,
But when I found out the guy who was in Bronx Tale like turned into a meth head and killed the cop and went to jail, like I was like, man, I
yeah,
really like that movie.
I know. So yeah, yeah, I don't know. It's up to you, as a person, but you should, try to know as much as you can. Um, so again, my point is, oh, also I was like, I wonder if you could drive a Model T, and you can at the Gilmore Car Museum in Michigan. You can take a class to drive a Model T, and it's like really hard, and there's like three pedals, and you have to do all this like weird gear stuff, and like that sounds super fun, you know?
That does sound super fun.
So stuff like that, like I would love to do. And then, but again, I hope I've said this loud enough. I am not going to fucking quote Henry Ford in a presentation about hard work.
All right,
Very
yeah,
clear, very
noted.
clear. That's a very
Very
clearly
clearly.
my opinion. So
I feel like
that's why
somebody did that at your last work.
abs
Is
oh,
that what
100%.
happened?
Yep, I lost my mind. I that's when I like joined that women's group and did that presentation for the company for Women's History Month, being like, and then like gave other options of people to quote, and yes, I was mad, and a couple of people were like, "Thank you for bringing that up," because there's just like no need to do that, you
Was
know.
it like in a all hands or something?
Oh,
Somebody quoted
a,
Henry Ford.
1,000%. It was like its own quote on a side, being like,
What
"Work
was the
hard."
quote?
I don't know, something like "work hard" and whatever, nothing
I'm
new.
saying, was it like a very, very unique quote, or
No,
was it just something very? Okay, got it.
nothing
Okay,
special.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, so during Women's History Month, people often quote Coco Chanel, and I just found my college graduation announcement where I quoted her, because she says like nice things and that are exciting, and like so. I mean, it happens. She was a woman business owner. She's iconic style, all of those things. But you also like need to know that like during World War II, she bet on the Nazis. So that's what I'm going to tell you about. Um, so yeah, yes.
She bet on
So
the Nazis.
yes, I'll tell you all about it. Not like, you know what I mean? She thought they were going to win. Um, so, oh, I also wanted to remind you that I have my pearls. They were $6. Um, and here is a quote to start us off from the book Sleeping with the Enemy that I read that I would recommend. Um, it says, this quote is from a New York Times review of Sleeping with the Enemy. And they say, quote, Gabrielle Chanel, better known as Coco, was a wretched human being, anti-Semitic, homophobic, social climbing, opportunistic, ridiculously snobbish, and given to sins of phrase making like, if blonde, use blue perfume. She was addicted to morphine and actively collaborated with the Germans during the Nazi occupation of Paris. That's the
I mean,
TLDR.
yeah, that paints a picture.
Yeah. Mhm. Um, So the quote goes on to say she revolutionized fashion, but I don't know if I believe that either. Because like fashion is, I don't know, obviously, again, I'm not a fashion historian, so we can talk about this maybe later in different ways, but like styles have to exist somewhere, and a lot of times they exist out of like utilitarian things. Like I just found this out in this video that I watched. Do you know where a trench coat comes from?
The trenches.
Yes, it comes from the trenches of World War I. It was like the military coat they would wear in the trenches.
I can see that. I saw
I can
Dunkirk. I
I
remember
can
that.
totally see it, but I was like, oh, like I didn't think of that until like I saw that in a video and I was like, oh, well, that's crazy. Like that was like so then like Chanel popularized a trench coat for women, but like it was already there, it already existed. I had this like I had a couple like rich boyfriends in college who were like very like blue blood American guys, and one of them, his brother one time took us on a tour of the library at Harvard because he was at Harvard, and like now that I think about it, his brother was a creep, and like he probably was like alone in the library at night. That's weird, but
Why
that guy,
studying?
no, it was like in a creepy way, but
Oh, okay.
um. But that boyfriend that I had, he made a store in Soho that was like, you have to be rich to own a store in Soho, but they would do things like buy like garbage man uniforms from like Turkey and make it into high fashion. You know.
There's one episode of last podcast talked about how in that part of New York, there's all these stores that have like four shirts inside them. It's like who is this for? Can you explain that? I saw that when I was in New York. I was like, what are these?
So here's what I think, and here's what I've been like learning, and this is something that I learned about with uh in I think maybe in the Versace episode of last podcast and a couple other things that were like kind of getting put together for me is it's not about those high fashion things. Like it's not about like those stores that are like the Versace store that has like six dresses in it. There are very few people actually going there and buying those things. What it is an advertisement for people with less money to buy like save up $1,000 and buy a Chanel handbag. That's where they make their money. They make their money from selling perfume, from selling keychains, from selling the stuff that like a less rich person will say, I want the status symbol of wearing this like gigantic Louis Vuitton outfit, but like, and that's where they make all their money.
Oh,
Like not on the things that cost $1 million, on the things that cost like $1,000 and selling all of those for someone people are like saving up to do that special thing.
yeah, I
You know,
know. I remember that too. I meant more like the stores where it's not like the brand is the
I
clothing.
have
It's like
no idea.
somebody who
Yeah.
just starts the store, and it's always some like 35-year-old really attractive woman, and it's like, what do you what how do you have this money?
And I don't understand, like, I feel so bad for the people who work there. Like no one comes in. You just like stand there.
But it strikes me as like it's one of those places where like it's more like a status symbol that you work there. Like it's like when Abercrombie when we were in high school and it was like the good looking kids got
Yeah,
applications for
yeah.
Abercrombie. It's like one of those things.
Totally. Yeah,
I should
totally.
cover that guy one day, the Abercrombie guy. The guy's an absolute monster. Anyway,
Oh
sorry,
my
I'm
God.
derailing your episode.
No, I definitely want to hear about the Abercrombie guy. One time, actually, with that boyfriend, aforementioned boyfriend with the store, we were walking. There was an Abercrombie store right across from our dorm room, like our dorm building in downtown New York. And we went late at night. We went for a walk on the pier, and we went and they were re-carpeting the Abercrombie store, and they had extra carpet. And so we took a roll of carpet that was like a carpet scrap, and it was like 13 by 13. It was huge. And we took it back to my dorm room and that carpet in my dorm room for like 2 years. It was a beautiful like plaid. It's cool.
So you're a fan of Abercrombie?
No, I mean, I don't think I ever bought a single thing at Abercrombie, but I had
Okay.
that free carpet. That was really cool. Um,
I can't think of
so
any style more opposite your style than you wearing Abercrombie.
can you imagine? I remember when
No.
I worked at Chili's and you had to wear khaki collared shirt. And I was there one time and someone was like, "Oh, hey, are you working today?" And I was like, "No, I just wear this in my regular life." I was like, and they were like, "Sorry." And I was like, "I would never freaking wear this. You were on drugs."
Of course, of course.
Um, okay, so let's talk about Coco Chanel and her boyfriend, Herman Dinklage. I'll say Dinklage, and their relationship and their collaboration with the Nazis. He was like a full-out Nazi. And I'm also going to hold space to talk later about Catherine Dior, who is the sister of Christian Dior. There's an Apple TV show called The New Look that just came out. I watched the first two episodes. It's pretty good. I definitely want to finish it, but it is about how Catherine Dior was actually a resistance fighter, and she ended up in a concentration camp. And
Yikes.
she was liberated in 1945, and she lived until 2008. So she deserves her own episode because she's definitely a hero of this time, and I'll get to that. So let's talk about Chanel herself. Gabrielle Bonheur Coco Chanel was born in 1883 on August 19th. She was born in like a small town in France. Her family was like unbelievably poor. Her parents weren't married. They would get married later and they would have 11 children. Chanel would make up stories about her childhood to like, she'd lie about her age. She'd make her dad sound like a hero when like really they were just like a dirt poor family. Eventually, Chanel and her sisters went to a poorhouse for children where they lived with nuns. And while she was living there, the nuns taught her two things. They taught her how to sew, and guess what the other thing they taught her is?
How to dislike other people.
Yep, how to, specifically Jewish people. They taught her how
Got
to
it.
hate Jewish people. So she definitely came out of that, came out of her childhood very, very anti-Semitic, and she also knew how to sew. So she moved to Paris, and she would sing in cabarets in Paris, which like sounds super fun. And I think I want to mention this later or maybe a couple times, but in the show, The New Look, they really do a great job with like the visuals and like the ambiance and like Paris is so beautiful, and like everyone is like starving to death and living in these beautiful apartments because like, your stuff isn't worth anything anymore. Like you have like, you still have the space and there'll be like these big empty apartments that belong to Jewish people that the Nazis would like be like, "Oh, Chanel, you can just take anything you want out of here," like things like that. So it's like a beautiful background for a lot of terrible suffering.
I mean, it must have been a hell of a time to be alive if you were
Yeah.
not Jewish.
Yeah. So a lot of her life, well, no, I mean, people in France were starving. All of them were. If you were Jewish, you were sent to a concentration camp. If you weren't,
So,
you were
what
still
year was
starving.
this?
So this starts off in it started this she moves to Paris in the 1920s, but I'm talking like during World War II,
Okay.
is when you get like the in the show they do a really good job of like showing like visually what it was like. You're in this beautiful city, but everyone is starving. Like Christian Dior is in a bread line, like there's no food. So a lot of but we'll get to that a little bit later. So a lot of Chanel's life is bookmarked by men that she met and gave her opportunities. She never married, she never had any kids, but she had a ton of affairs, and these men would like give her things. It was like the kind of affair where like the guy gives you jewels, you know, like
I don't.
here's an emerald. I don't either, obviously, but like that's the kind of like fancy affair it is. Her first big affair was in 1906 with a French ex-cavalry officer and textile heir named Etienne Balsan. She became his mistress. That's when she gets to live this like big rich lifestyle. He just like gives her an apartment. He like gives her a lot of things. And since he was a textile heir, he also had a lot of like fashion contacts and he had a lot of extra fabric and he was able to buy some fabric for her to sew and create with at like a really cheap price. So she was ready to kind of start her fashion line. In 1908, she started another affair with Balsan's friend, Captain Arthur Edward Boy Capel. So everybody calls him Boy. He was love of her life. They were together for 9 years. And but even during those 9 years, like she was still just his mistress. He got married during that time to an English aristocrat named Lady Diana Wyndham. And
Okay, she didn't have an affair. She had a boyfriend who then had an affair with her while being married. Actually, technically, he had an affair with his wife while dating her.
I think he was already always with someone else.
Got it.
Like when I say like had an affair, it's like I mean she's like a mistress. Like she's the person that he like, you know, gives fancy things to, sets her up in an apartment, but like he has a family. You know, all these
How,
all these
how do
men.
I how do I get one of these?
Become someone's mistress, you mean?
Yes, I want to be the mistress
Right, right, right.
to
Um,
a woman,
yeah,
preferably.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Boy Capel died on December 22nd, 1919 in a car accident. And she will always, say that she references that. And that was like something tragic in her life that she would always reflect back to. But those two men that she was, in relationships with, they helped her buy a store. So she wanted to be like a designer. She had like a good fashion sense. They bought her a store to sell hats. So this time it's still pretty Edwardian. There's like corsets and like those huge, huge hats that people wear, and she would add a little something like a feather or a jewel or something, and people really liked them. They became pretty fashionable. She opened up a little shop in Deauville, France, which is on the beach, and it was during World War I. And it was a really good time to have a store in a beach town because of course all the rich people in Paris left Paris during World War I and they went to these beach towns. And so she was able to have like her sister and her aunt would wear the hats on the boulevard and people would, be like, "Oh, where'd you get that?" and like want to go to the store. So she starts um to get a little bit more popular with like her hats. She also starts to design dresses. She designs dresses in jersey fabric, which is like an inexpensive to make fabric, but she would make like fancy dresses. She got a lot of that from Balsan. He had gotten her like all this extra fabric, and she didn't really like invent anything. Other people were doing it, but she was kind of pulling things from menswear in a way that was different and just starting to design around. Another man she met during this time was the Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich of Russia, and she would design for the Russian ballet, and so she would do like all sorts of like, international things as well. In the 1920s, she started to create her perfume, the Chanel number 5, and this is where she's going to make a shit ton of money. Is from selling the perfume because it's like low cost, it's very unique. They use like very natural fragrances. It's the same recipe that they use on it today. So that's where she ended up making a ton of money. Um, there's a little bit of like a myth behind why it's called Chanel number 5. There's one that she just loved the number 5. That was her favorite number. Another that, the person who had designed the perfume, like the actual perfumer person, gave her like 20 options, and this was the fifth one, all sorts of reasons. But either way, it becomes very, very popular. It's in a classic little bottle. It's like a whiskey bottle. So it's kind of like it's not as, like, the style then was to have those like really like beautiful perfume bottles, and hers was like very simple, and people really loved it. So in the 20s, she sold Chanel number 5 to a company run by two brothers. They were the Wertheimer brothers. There's Pierre and another one, and they gave her 10% of the sales, and they mass marketed it like around the world. She made so much money from this. Like, this is where she's really going to make all of her money. Um, the Wertheimers, they were Jewish, and she's later going to try to get out of the contract and say that she was like tricked by them, and use a lot of her anti-Semitic beliefs to try to get out of that. They ended up escaping to the United States, and it's a bit out of order, but the Wertheimers do sell Chanel number 5 to someone who is not Jewish to protect their investment, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. Um,
Have you smelled Chanel number 5?
I'm sure I have. I can't remember though. I'm
Yeah,
gonna put on
I don't know either.
my perfume currently, the one that I've been wearing for like 6 years, no, 10 years, is no longer available in America. So if we have anybody who lives in Europe and wants to hook me up with some perfume, send us an email, doomtofellpod@gmail.com, and I will
What
be
is
happy to
it?
pay your phone. It's Artelier cologne vanilla incense. It's really good,
Okay.
and you can't get it anywhere. Um, so in the meantime, while Chanel is doing this, she's building her fashion business, she's building her perfume business. She also continues to meet a lot of rich and very influential people. She becomes really good friends with Winston Churchill. They go hunting together. There's pictures of them like hunting together. He just adores her. There's like a anecdotal story where he was upset about something and like cried in her lap. He just like loves Chanel. She has an affair with the Duke of Westminster, Hugh Richard Arthur Grosvenor, and he was the richest man in the world. So now she's like moving up, you know, as high as you can go. He buys her, a house, all the things. Um, she knew Edward, the Prince of Wales, the one who married Wallace Simpson, who abdicated the throne. You remember that?
Yeah.
So she's friends with him. This circle is rich and aristocratic, and they are very anti-Jewish. Edward and Wallace Simpson, they will, meet with Hitler at the Eagle's Nest. Like, they were much more like, we can have peace with the Nazis, not like we should stop them.
What you know why they hate the Jews so much? Like
I
what
mean,
was the thing?
it's, it's like, it is a tale as old as time. It's otherizing another group of people. In Germany, it stemmed a lot from, so I was looking up like other riots when I w like besides like the Nika riots of history, and like there's a list on Wikipedia of like famous riots in history. 95% of them are riots because people are trying to kick Jews out of their town. It's just like an easy otherization, an easy group of people to blame. They handled the money, which they did because that was the only job they were allowed to have in a lot of history. Because
Yeah, it's like you force them into a certain thing, then you're angry that they can control that thing.
yep,
I mean, isn't that why Hollywood is what it is now? It's because they weren't allowed to do anything but like
yeah,
entertainment. Entertainment was considered like lowly
yeah. A lot of it is like that. And
And
like,
then people are complaining like now the Jewish people control the industry. It's like, well, yeah, they were. What were they supposed to do?
and it's
Like,
not like they're having like meetings talking about Judaism and Hollywood. It just like happens to be that way, you know? And like the bank thing, like this it's a side, but drives me out of my freaking mind. In the Bible, it says that you cannot charge interest on loans. And obviously people needed that. So that's why like Jewish people would be in banking and they would be able to give loans to Christians when Christians weren't allowed to give loans to them.
oh,
And it just like drives me fucking out of my mind because how can you quote the Bible for things like anti-abortion, but not mention that you shouldn't have interest and not just remove all interest from student loans? Fuck you.
well, hold on. Wasn't the theory? I'm not going down this road. Like I feel like we're gonna get into. I
Well, you can't use the Bible to justify one thing and then conveniently forget another thing.
but they made the Jews do it because the Christians couldn't charge interest.
Correct. And now in America, Christians are like, we want this to be a Christian nation, but we're also going to have these predatory loans, you know? I'm saying Congress is using the Bible to justify some things, but not other things.
You're talking about Congress. Okay, thank you. That's where the confusion was.
Okay. I don't think that Jewish people have a secret cabal against anyone or do anything secret or nefarious. I do not believe that. In
Let's
any
just
way. Form.
we're literally heading towards the Kanye West route right now. Let's
We are
just steer
absolutely
back.
not. We are not. I'm 100% right. I'm not saying anything wrong. Um, so anyway, so she is with a group of people who are, you know, very anti-Jewish. They're also very homophobic, which is funny because like all these affairs are all like a little gay. You know, there's gay people around, of course, like always. You know, it's not like they didn't know gay people, but they still have like, still are homophobic. She also becomes addicted to morphine. She will shoot up morphine every day for most of her life just to like survive. So she's also addicted to drugs. Um, this is when she allegedly invents the little black dress, but like, you know, it's just like something repeatable and something that people can count on, like her style, and that's how they become pretty classic. In the 1930s, Samuel Goldwyn of Hollywood gives her $1 million in 1920 money, the 1930 money to go to California and design for the movies. So she goes to California, gets to America, goes to California, and it doesn't work out. People don't love her fashion sense in Hollywood as much as they thought that they would, and her costumes don't really get a lot of attention. And she goes back to Europe and was like, it didn't work out, but she still got a shit ton of money from that. Um, Her fashion line, the Chanel Couture, was a lucrative business. 4,000 people worked there by 1935. So a ton of people. She has some rivalries with like other designers, but it was very successful. So now it's the late 1930s, and the Nazis are coming to Paris. And right before, in 1939, there was a labor strike of garment workers, which we just talked about recently. So there's a labor strike, and the workers lock the doors of Chanel, and they're like, we need to be treated better. You know, we need to be in a union. And she's such an asshole. She says like, oh, I just do this for, you know, I do this because I love it. She's like, why don't I just sell the company to you, my workers? Like, I'll sell a company to you. You guys can be in charge. But she like knew they couldn't afford it. You know, like they could never do that. So they had to
Right.
say like no. And then she ended up closing her business right before the war. She said that she did it because to be patriotic to France, but really she did it to say fuck you to her workers. She didn't need the money, and it was kind of a hassle, so she just like stopped doing it for a little bit. Um, we'll talk about Dior later when I talk about Catherine Dior in another episode someday. But he did keep working. He worked for a fashion house, and a lot of them would make, you know, they would make gowns for Nazis, and it is a thing to be like, how could you do that? But also like everyone's starving, my family needs to eat, you know? And like someone's gonna do this. So
Yeah.
what do
I
I do?
mean,
Yeah.
Hugo Boss made uniforms, but like, what were
Yeah.
you? Yeah, like, what are you supposed to do?
What are you supposed to do? And like you need to employ people, like, you know, you need to, I don't know.
They
And
all did it. Bear did it. Volkswagen did it. Like they all.
yeah,
IBM sold. Wait, I'm gonna get libel for this. I think
I
IBM
IBM is
sold the machines that they used to tabulate like people in the concentration camps or something. It
I
was
believe
something
that.
like that.
Yeah. 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 So like there's, you know, something that but Chanel, you know, she actually stopped her business during the war. but it was mostly because of the labor strike. Another thing in the new look that they do a good job of is like, yes, everything's beautiful and the people in Paris are so scared, So the Jewish people have been taken out of Paris. There's the French resistance, which is, people on the ground trying to get the Nazis out, but the Nazis are in Paris. There's a Nazi flag on the Eiffel Tower. And if you do anything wrong, they will kill you. Like there is no like it is a very tense. Everything's very tense. Everyone is afraid. Um, but a place where they did always have food and always have whatever they wanted was at the Ritz Hotel in Paris. And that's where Chanel lived during World War II. She lived at the Ritz with the Nazis. That's where they lived. Um, they had plenty of food. There's quotes in the book of people being like, "Oh, it's such a privilege in war to be fat and happy." You're like, "Yeah, because everyone's fucking starving, and you're having like three-course meals fed to you, like presented to you by waiters who are fucking terrified because if they mess anything up, you will shoot them." You know,
I
but they're
mean,
just like having
it
a
would be
great
nice to
fucking
have that.
time
It would be nice to have that kind of privilege.
for real. So I mean, but they're just ignoring everything, all the atrocities, and just like, living there. So this is where Chanel meets Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage. Um, Dinklage, maybe I think I might say Dinklage. I think that's what's happening. But his name was Spots. That was the a nickname for him. It means sparrow, because he was a spy, and he was a Nazi spy, like a German spy for so long. He spoke English, he spoke French, he spoke German. Obviously, he spoke a bunch of languages. And there's a story in Sleeping with the Enemy in the book where during World War II, when he's like visibly a Nazi, like, but he had been spying and pretending to be all these other things for a while. He sees a woman that he had known when he was spying in a different part of France. And he was like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And she sees that he's wearing this like SS uniform. And she was just like, "How fucking dare you? You were a spy this whole time." She's like, "I believed that you were like a French person who was working really hard and you were poor, but the whole time you were a spy, you know?" It's like
He's
once he's
like,
able to
listen.
be
He's
out.
like, listen, man. Being a spy isn't actually the worst thing I do. The worst thing I do is being a Nazi.
Yeah. Yes. That's really true. He was actually married to a Jewish woman named Maximilian Henriette Ida von Schonenbach, and they were both Nazi spies. Even after they got divorced in 1935 because she was Jewish, and so that he could go and do other things because it wasn't even in their circle, it wasn't safe for him to be married to her. But they both kept spying. They kind of like overlooked her Jewishness because she was such a good spy for the Nazis, which is fucked up.
I mean,
Um,
yeah,
And then also, incidentally, everyone in the story dies in the 1970s. Like they weren't put to trial for any of this.
right,
So
right.
she died in the 1970s as well. Um, but so Spots is his nickname. He met Chanel at the Ritz, and it's definitely, the thought is that as early as 1941, Chanel was working for General Walter Schellenberg. He was an SS officer. He was chief of the Abwehr, which is like their counterintelligence. And he was just like one of the biggest Nazis in Paris. And she was like kind of doing little things for him for a long time since the 1940s. Schellenberg was, a very, very bad guy. He was tried in Nuremberg. He got 6 years in prison for war crimes. He was released after in the 1950s. He had an incurable liver disease, so they let him go to like go out and die on his own. And Chanel paid for his medical care and living expenses for the rest of his life.
Jeez,
You know, um,
friends in high
Chanel's nephew,
places.
for real. Chanel's nephew, he was actually captured by the SS. I think he was more of a resistance fighter, for real, and she used her connections to get him out, which is understandable, definitely. But by the Nazis, she was given the code name Westminster, which was like a nod to her affair with the Duke of Westminster. And she's not the only woman that collaborated with the Nazis. A lot of like regular women did, like they would sleep with the Nazis, like in sex work or, different ways to survive. Like because they
Yeah,
needed food. And but some of them were like, if these guys are going to be in charge, then like I want to date one, all the things. When the war ended, a lot of those women were called horizontal collaborators. You get it.
get
And
their
uh,
heads shaved, right?
Yep, they had their head shaves and paraded down the street. And I read a quote that was like, not a hair on Chanel's head was touched, because like she was definitely one of them,
Yeah.
if you're
I
looking
mean,
at the
I kind of
definition.
look, I kind of get it. Like that's why you were like, oh, that she was betting on the Nazis, and I was like, I don't know, man. Like I think that if I was in that class and I was in that moment and I was like, these guys are kind of nuts. Like I don't really want to fight them because they're gonna do horrible. Like I don't know. Like
Right, but plenty of people didn't actually go on spy missions, and she actually did.
so you think it was because she actually bought into the ideology? It wasn't like a I'm fucked if I don't go along with this.
No, I think she bought into it and she was like, this is going to be great for me. You know? She's like, she
Mm.
tries to get her, I don't know when I write this, but she tries to get Chanel number 5 back from the Wertheimers, and she invokes a thing called Aryan law, which is like Jewish people can't own anything. There's no way they own my business, and she tries to get it back from them. But she doesn't know that they have sold it to someone who is not Jewish, and then they send their own perfume spy. His name's Gregory Thomas. He seems awesome. He's like 6'8". He's like really tall and like comes from America, sneaks all the way through France, steals the recipe and brings it back to America so they can start mass producing Chanel number 5 on their own, which I love. And I want to know more about that story sometime. But in 1943, Chanel did go on a mission for the Nazis to Madrid. They called it Operation Model Hoot, which is model hat, because she was a designer. She was supposed to get to Churchill and get Churchill to stop the war. She knew him, and that's what they had pressured her to do. Um, and this was a specific side hustle deal by the SS to be the ones that negotiate peace, because this is when the war is coming to an end, and they're trying to figure out how Nazis can like still exist as like a thing, but like make peace with the English. Um, she brought her friend Vera Lombardi with her, and there's one in the like a declassified German file. They said that Lombardi was invited because Chanel and her were like girlfriends, like lesbians, but I don't hear that anywhere else. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, she invited her friend with her to Madrid, and it's a great scene in the show The New Look. But before she could try to get to Churchill, Lombardi told on her. She told the British embassy what Chanel was trying to do. That Chanel was specifically working with Spots and the Nazis and the SS to have this meeting. Um, so she had to go back to Paris. Um,
Why is the meeting nefarious? It's like they're not trying to kill Churchill, they're trying to get in a room with him.
right, but they're getting in a room with him to make peace with the Nazis, which is not what Churchill wanted to do. You
Yeah,
know?
I mean, I don't think it's that nefarious. So it's like Churchill's like a wet noodle. Like he can negotiate on his own behalf. Like he can make an argument.
Sure, but she's like, it's a that the mission is to keep Nazis in power. It's not to like not have Nazis anymore.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I see your point.
Um, so at the end of World War II, she's like a little bit like fuck, like this, like all of the Nazis are leaving. They are being tried for their crimes. She put a sign on the door of her store that was selling just her perfume and said that there's a free bottle of Chanel number 5 for all the American GIs, which definitely helped like the public opinion of her. Um, because there would be like lines out the door for soldiers to take Chanel number 5 back to their wives and girlfriends in the United States. And in Wikipedia, there's a quote that said that they would have been outraged if the French police had touched a hair on her head because they were like so like excited to be able to bring that back, that like fancy French thing. Um, Later, she would come to an agreement with the Wertheimers, and she would still get big percentages of Chanel number 5. Um, Really, she just made like millions and millions of dollars from Chanel number 5, even after the war. Um, she Churchill directly got her off. She was going to be arrested and charged with spying and collaborating with the Nazis, but Churchill got her off. It's probably because she knew that many of the English aristocracy were Nazi sympathizers, like Edward and Wallace Simpson.
Wait, what?
Like I just told you, I said that Prince Edward, who was going to be king, spent time with Wallace Simpson at the Eagle's Nest with Hitler. And they were like, we should negotiate with them. And they were also very anti-Semitic, and they were like, we should have peace with these, when Churchill was like, absolutely not.
Wait, so why was hold on. The why was Churchill like not like that?
Because he wasn't like that.
So basically, Britain would have gone along with Nazi Germany if it weren't for Winston Churchill.
And like, yeah, not just, yes. A lot of it is because Winston Churchill's was working he was one of the allies, and their thing was we cannot allow Nazi Germany to exist. And he knew if you negotiate with Hitler, he's going to kill you. Like he's not going to stop, you know?
Wow.
Remember Churchill's like, speech about fighting on the beaches? He's like, we're going to defend this island till the death. Like we're not going to negotiate with them.
Now I wonder if he did it because he literally was like, we can't cede control to Hitler, or because of the Aryan stuff.
I think it's the control thing, you know?
Probably,
Yeah.
probably. Now that you said that, yeah, it's probably just mostly that.
And like he was right. Like we couldn't like imagine if we'd all be Nazis, you know?
I don't think I would have
Well,
been
you
a
wouldn't be
part of
here.
that
Yeah.
cohort. Yeah,
hmm
you on the other hand,
I'd be here. You would not be here.
I would not be here.
Yeah. Um, so in 2023, there were some papers that suggested that Chanel was actually secretly part of the French resistance, but I don't believe it. But I can look in that later if someone, really, really believes it. But she ended up, kind of living in Switzerland for a little bit, finally going back to Paris and slowly becoming more popular. And as we know, in the 1960s, Jackie Kennedy is wearing her Chanel suit when JFK is shot. So it's like definitely back in fashion. I also was like, and that totally makes sense. Like the this is I don't know if this is related, but it feels like it's related. Like the weekend before JFK was killed, he was in Florida, meeting with Werner von Braun about the space race, you know? So we certainly brought over the Nazis that like were helpful in a whole
Yeah, of
different way.
course.
I think we should maybe talk about that someday too, because that story is just like so interesting. Um, so Chanel lived until 1971. She was 87 years old. She went to sleep and said to her maid, "You see, this is how you die," and then just died. You know where she died?
Ritz.
At the Ritz. She lived there for over 30 years, which
I
also
looked.
sounds dope.
I looked up the Ritz. You can actually rent the suite that she lived in for
Ooh,
40,000 euros a night.
Jesus fucking Christ.
40,000 euros a night.
That is insane. I love that. So when Chanel died in the 1970s, the First Lady of France, Madame Pompadour, was organizing a hero's tribute to her because she was so famous. But French intelligence agencies released documents showing that she had been a spy, and they ended the funeral plans. So they didn't even have like the big funeral for her that they wanted to because it started to like hear some of the things that she had done. Um, and yeah, I guess that's it. I feel like it's okay to, like her clothes and like her things, but we don't need to quote her as a businesswoman because she would have, you know, been in business with the Nazis forever if that had been an option. She was, sleeping with a Nazi for many, 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 many years. She went to all their parties. She knew all the big ones. She met Heinrich Himmler. Like she was, in their circles. And there's a little bit of like maybe she did it to survive, but also like she did it because she wanted to be rich and she was very, 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 very rich.
Really? How rich?
Like I keep saying very, I'm gonna do it. Coco Chanel net worth. So it says when she died, she's worth $5 million in 1971 money, which is, oh, it's worth less today due to inflation. Nope, that's not true. What am I
It's
even looking at?
impossible.
That's impossible. That is, well, you did a terrible job, AI. No, it is about $38 million dollars
Yeah,
just for
that's
like
pretty rich.
personal wealth. Yeah. Yeah.
Good for
Yeah.
her. Well,
Yep.
not good for her, I guess.
All the things, just like know what you know and think about who you're thinking about in these months of
Yeah.
history.
So one
That's
thing
all.
I looked up that so you talked about Christian Dior and Christian
hmm
Dior's sister. You should just do an episode on that family because another
I'm
one of
absolutely
his
going to.
sister,
Yeah.
Francois Dior, that's listed here as a French socialite and neo-Nazi underground financier.
Amazing.
Crazy.
Let's definitely I'll definitely do that because it's super interesting because you're like and then they are these like super iconic designs and this like, time in the world. And yeah, that's crazy. Oh, this man, this Ritz room is so beautiful. I love a French apartment like everyone does. You know, it's like the high ceilings and the all of the like outlining and the things on the walls and the beautiful chandeliers and just like, oh my God, gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm down like a weird rabbit hole now, looking up like Karl Lagerfeld, the Yves Saint Laurent.
We could maybe I'll do a fashion designer series because I would love to, love to dig into their lives.
These guys are so unbelievably cool. Like just the wiki picture of Yves Saint Laurent, I was like, damn, that's a cool looking dude.
You know who has the coolest picture is the Duke of Westminster that she had an affair with. Um, that when he was like the biggest, he was the the what you called it. Oh my God. Okay, hold on. This is going to be a little bit. So the current Duke of Westminster looks like a big old nerd, but the one during that time, um, when she had an affair with him, man, he looked cool. I'm gonna find him. He was the Hugh Grosvenor one. I'm gonna send it to you into this chat, but like he looked awesome. Um, and he was the richest man in the world, which is crazy. Um,
Um,
yeah.
my other thought as you were talking was being like outlandishly successful back then. He does look cool, and he actually looks like the current Duke of. He looks a
I guess it,
lot like the current Duke. I guess they're related, right?
yeah, I guess if the current Duke of Westminster like dressed cooler and didn't just like look like a nerd, then like yeah.
Um, no, my yeah. Wait, they're all related. Yeah, look, the names, they're all the same name.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's a British. Oh my God. What were you gonna say? I wanted to make sure we talk about Kate Middleton and what you think is happening with her when we're done with this.
What I was saying was, it occurs to me like looking at this stuff, I'm like, man, like you really didn't have to do a crazy lot to be like super successful and stand out from people. Like I don't know, it just felt like it would be easier to be super successful back then than it is like today.
Hmm.
But who knows? Kate
Yeah.
Middleton, I don't really follow the royal family very much. I don't like
But
it's
this is
weird.
like it's really weird, and this is I mean I've watching this like hilarious like 25-part series on Instagram. And there's like William had an affair. There's potential love child. There's like did Kate have a mental breakdown? Is she in a coma? Is she alive? You know, it's very fun.
I
It's
mean,
been
what do
it's
you
been
think
a
is going
very
on?
it's been a very fun week. I feel like she had a I don't know if mental breakdown is like the right word, but I feel like it's potential that she just like is mad and not gonna put up with their shit anymore, you know?
It's I don't totally agree with that because it feels like she was the one that like is really into that life more than
Well,
anybody
that's what I
else.
mean. But I also feel like, because okay, yes, because I feel like if I was ever going to do an episode on Kate Middleton, I was gonna call it Kate Middleton. She understood the assignment. Like she was super
Yeah,
in. But
yeah.
maybe finding out that there's a baby with this woman that he's having an affair with, she was just like, this is too much for me.
What what are you basing that on?
I'm basing it on like I'm not gonna. It's all over the news. He had an affair with this woman, and
He did it. William had an affair with a woman.
yes, many years ago, and Kate found out, and then she has a older child that might be Williams, and then she also might be pregnant right now. We also haven't seen her in a while. Her name is Lady. I mean, this is all conspiracy theory. It's very fun. Her name is Lady Rose Hanbury, and it was like that is definitely true that he had an affair with her.
When they were married.
Yeah,
What did he sit with like cheating in that family?
exactly. So anyway, it's very exciting. I've watched a ton of conspiracy theory stuff. It's fun to yell about. I mean, what are we? Yeah.
Taylor, you should, and that this woman's married too. Like
Oh yeah,
everybody's
yeah, yeah,
just.
yeah. It's like a small, weird circle. And and then, listening to this story, it's literally always been like that.
So one thing I recommend is there's a 4 or 5 part series on Princess Diana and the royal family on that podcast I keep telling you about called um you're wrong about.
Hmm.
And it's awesome. It talks so much about the history of the family and why they are the way they are and why they only marry each other and all the
Hmm.
stuff around that. So I highly recommend it.
I know it's
Um,
wild. I mean, you could just watch The Crown. I retweeted something. Maybe I don't know if I did it from or re-Instagram something where someone was like, I would pay so much money to be in the group chat of the Crown Raiders right now because the people who are writing The Crown are like, what is going on? Because they're up to Prince William meeting Kate in The Crown, um, which is fun.
yeah, I never got into that, unsurprisingly. Man, so much intrigue. Yeah, her husband looks like a nerd too.
He does,
They
and
all
he's a
look
lot
like
older than
nerds
her. All look like nerds.
with infinite
And
money.
like honestly, like she's fine, but it says like on her Wikipedia page, it's like she was a model, and you're like, what? It doesn't make sense. She's not very pretty.
Yeah.
Like
I don't
it's
know.
like just because
I
she
think
was rich, she got to like be a model.
was
Okay.
she born into royalty? What we're
Yes. 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 I think she was actually like more powerful than him.
he's the seventh Earl of Durham.
So stupid.
But like it's interesting. Wait, she went and got a degree from Open University. Is that a real thing?
I know it doesn't sound fake. I don't know what that is either. I'm gonna look it up.
No, but it just strikes me like these people's jobs are just to like dress up and go places. Like that's
Yeah.
literally what their career is, and
Yep.
they're given billions of dollars to do that.
Yep.
So wild.
It is wild. And I love there's something I was like, oh, maybe I was talking to my mom about this because she watches The Crown and oh, my mom's here. Thank God my mom's here. She was so glad she was here when I got in the car accident. Um, my mom's here and she was talking about The Crown and how they're like, oh, what if we took all this away from the British people? They'd be so sad. And I'm like, I don't know, would they? Or would they be like,
I think
could we have
so.
the
I
money
think
for houses?
I don't know.
Like,
I did. There was a recent a poll that the British people actually do love the monarchy. The intrigue of it all is just very entertaining, I think. But
and there was
um,
also our friend Lindsay from our old job is actually in the UK right now, and her and I are messaging because she was like, "I'm at dinner with a bunch of Brits, and they don't care at all where Kate Middleton is. They're like, she can have her privacy." And she's like, "What are they talking about?" Like in Britain, they don't care as much as America right now, and we are just having the best time with this conspiracy. I hope she's not dead, but it's been fun. It's been a fun week of conspiracy theories around the royal family.
I'm glad we were able to wrap our podcast episode about Coco Chanel with Kate Middleton.
Honestly, if we didn't mention it, we would be wrong because it is the thing that's happening in the world right now. Which means
This will
what is really happening and what are they trying to distract us with, from
Taylor is putting on her tinfoil hat right
I
now,
am.
and
It's pretty fun.
um,
I have one message. Nadine and I were talking a little bit, our friend Nadine, about labor and you know, her and her husband are both in unions in Canada and somehow, it does work in some places, but it is, like she sent me a quote from Robert Reich. He's a person on Twitter. I don't know what his actual job is, but
yeah,
he like you know who that is. But he said the two richest humans on the planet Earth have companies fighting in court to dismantle the government agency that holds corporations accountable for illegal union busting. They know that they can't stop workers from organizing, so now they want to destroy the whole system. So just like if someone's union busting, they're not they would pay you nothing.
yeah. I'm not advocating for yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, they don't want unionization.
Yeah.
That is clear.
Very clear. Cool. That's it. I'm going to rent a
Sweet.
car and go see Dan Carlin on Thursday.
Love it. Love
Oh,
it.
did you see that? Did
Awesome.
you see the stickers that I got? You
I
saw them, right?
did. I did. You sent me a text with them.
Yeah, they're cool.
Very cool. Please write to us, doomnflpod@gmail.com. Find us on the socials at doomnflpod. We will rejoin you in a couple of days with my episode, which we will discuss, or I will discuss with Taylor shortly.
Woohoo! Thanks, Bart.
Sweet. Thanks,
See
Taylor.
ya.